Good morning, this is Kris Shoemaker, also known as Yehudah ben Shomeyr, and you're listening to Coffee with Kris, the time of the day where we share a cup of coffee and share a bit of the Word of God. Thank you so much for joining me on this Wednesday morning for a hot cup of coffee and a hot cup of the Word of God. Our Sidra today comes from the Torah portion of Shemot, which means names, and our Sidra, our Aliyah for today, our passage is chapter 3, verses 1 through 15. I just want to read one simple little tiny verse. Let's go to verse 7 of chapter 3. Then Adonai said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry because of their slave masters, for I know their pains. For I know their pains. What this verse is saying that God knows, and not just sympathizes, but empathizes with our pain, our suffering, our trials, and tribulations. Now, if that's so, we may be asking the question, so why did he let it happen in the first place? Why did he allow this pain, this trouble, this trial, this tribulation to come into our lives in the first place if all he's going to do is just sympathize and empathize with our pain? Well, think of it this way. Number one, we live in a fallen world. So we're naturally going to have to deal with the consequences of living in a fallen and sinful world. And we're going to have to suffer under the hand of somebody else's will because God doesn't go against man's free will. And sometimes man's free will violates another person's free will. So we live in a fallen world. He doesn't go against man's free will. And he has a prophetic plan. Now, God has, his divine will and his permissive will. His divine will is that everything goes according to righteousness and holiness. But when that doesn't always happen because we live in a fallen world and God doesn't impinge upon somebody's free will, he has a contingency plan, a plan B, his permissive will. See, it was God's divine perfect will for Israel to enter the promised land and not have to spend 40 years wandering in the wilderness. The 40 years wandering in the wilderness was his permissive will, his backup plan. God's plan for Jonah was for him to go straight away and preach to the Ninevites. Well, that didn't happen. So Jonah had to take a submarine ride in the belly of a big fish, and God's permissive will, his plan B, kicked in, and we see that Jonah eventually did end up in Nineveh and preach. So we've got to think of Romans 8:28. For all things work together for good, for them that love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. The best thing is to go by God's perfect will, by his divine plan from the get-go, which means obeying him no matter what, instead of the plan B, which is the long road, which is the more painful, drawn-out road. But if he has to, he's going to pull out the plan B, his permissive will. Guys, thanks so much for listening. Go out there and have a great day. Shalom and God bless.